How do you make progress with your training when injuries seem to keep coming up? This is something that so many people deal with, and especially for those of you that are over 40 like me. The older you get, the more that these old injuries come back to haunt you, and it can really seem like you're just fighting a losing battle. Like no matter what you do, nothing seems to work. And there's three concepts that will completely change the game for you when you understand them and you can implement them correctly. And that is load management, progressive overload, and program periodization. The idea that there is a one-size-fits-all approach for everybody is completely flawed. There isn't. So the workouts that are going to be the best for your friend to get their results are not necessarily going to be the best for you. If you want to get really strong and really flexible and you want to bust through these plateaus and get to the levels of strength and flexibility that you've always wanted, then understanding these three concepts is going to be vital for you. And I've talked a lot about them individually, but today I'm going to talk about how they can come together to really make you strong and flexible and to overcome injuries so that you can continue to train. Because with the majority of sports-related injuries, rest is not best. The idea that you should rest to overcome an injury is a very flawed approach. What happens when you rest is that the inflammation will subside and the markers for pain might go down. So if you're feeling back pain or neck pain or shoulder pain and you think, oh, I'm just going to rest until that pain goes away, then what will happen is that, yes, the inflammation will go down. You might not experience the pain for a couple of weeks, and then when you go back to the gym, the underlying factors that cause that pain and that cause those problems are still there, and the pain will come back. But what happens is that when you do that enough and when you do it long enough, what's happening when you're resting is that you're actually going to be losing muscle mass. Your muscle mass will be atrophying, so the opposite of hypertrophy. It's going to be your muscle mass will be shrinking, getting smaller. And there's a whole cascade of other things that goes on in the body when you abstain from exercise. So it is almost never the right solution. The solution is to train in the presence of injury and to find a way to manage your load and to safely use progressive overload and program periodization to achieve the results that you want. So how do we do that? I'm going to talk about that and a lot more in this episode. But before I do, for everybody that's watching on YouTube, if you like my content, take a moment to subscribe to my channel. Just hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way for us, for the channel, and really helps us to get our content out there. And it means the world to me. You know, I put a lot of effort into all this content, and it's the one thing that you can do to show me that you're grateful for it and that you feel that it's doing something positive for you. So, let's talk about, we'll talk about load management first. So when you're going to the gym, you know, this is something, I mean, I turned 47 this year. Can you believe it? I can't believe it. I've been doing this YouTube thing now for well over 10 years. So if you watch some of my old videos, you'll see that I don't have these gray hairs in my beard that I now have. And at least I've still got the hair on my head. But, you know, as I get older, these concepts that I'm sharing with you guys become more and more relevant. And I've gone through the hard yards to get to this place where I understand this stuff. I've had some really, really bad injuries over the past 15 years. I've fractured my spine. I've got spondylolisthesis and spondylosis in L4 and L5. I've torn my meniscus. I've had a slap tear in both shoulders. I've had torn rotator cuffs in both shoulders. You know, I've had golfer's elbow, tennis elbow, I've had sprains in my wrist, all things that really stopped me in my tracks, and all things that before I knew what I know now, I did think that rest was the solution for it. But the problem with that is that, you know, you rest, you come back and boom, you know, the pain just comes back again. And so the solution to sports-related injuries is that you need to get stronger and more flexible. You need to be more capable at the things that you're doing, because what causes a sports-related injury is always a mismanagement of load. It basically means that you weren't capable of doing what you were trying to do at the time that you tried to do it. So, you know, an example of that is somebody that gets, you know, a common injury that people are coming to us for is a slap tear, a really nasty injury in the shoulder. But whatever it is that you were doing when you caused that slap tear, your body wasn't strong enough for it, it wasn't capable, and so the systems broke down. Too much pressure was put on that labrum and bang, you got a tear. So if your rotator cuff if your scapular stabilizers and if your prime movers, if your pecs, your deltoids, your biceps, triceps, lats, if all those muscle systems were stronger, you wouldn't have had that slap tear. And that's why some people can do, a one-armed handstand and hold it for, 30 seconds or whatever. And other people, if they try to do a handstand and they try to kick up, they get a slap tear or a really nasty shoulder injury. Another example is deadlifting. Deadlifting is this exercise that so many people demonize. They say that it's this horrible exercise that you shouldn't do. I get comments every now and then when I do any kind of a video on lower back pain and deadlifting, and people say, oh, you shouldn't deadlift if you've got lower back pain or if you've got this or that. And it's completely wrong. Deadlifting is actually one of the best exercises that you'll ever do to permanently overcome lower back pain. The problem is load management. So the problem is that people try to deadlift an amount of weight that their body is not capable of, and that causes a catastrophic injury. And so that person that doesn't understand load management is going to now put deadlifting in this category of exercises that's too dangerous and that's too risky for their body. And if you want to see a real life example of somebody who this completely changed their life for, go and watch the video that I posted 2 weeks ago of Milos Novkovic, one of our first ever UMS online coaching tribe members. We've been working together now for 6 years, and he shares his story with me of how when he started with the UMS, he'd had herniated discs in his back. He was told by doctors and surgeons that it would never get better, that it would only get worse from this point on. And when he started with us, he was too afraid to deadlift any more than 40 kilograms, which is about 85 pounds, maybe 88 pounds, something like that. So it's basically the barbell with a 10 kilogram weight on each side, or if you're in America, a barbell with a 22 pound weight on each side. And because every time he did that, he started to feel serious pain in his lower back. Now, 6 years later, so he's gotten older. As far as the doctors would say, his back should have deteriorated more by now. He's now deadlifting well over his body weight. He weighs about, I think he weighs 80 or 85 kilograms or something like that. And he's deadlifting 120 kilograms. And he's doing it for sets of 8 reps with good technique and with absolutely no pain at all. So what changed for Milos? The thing that changed is that we taught him how to manage load effectively, and we taught him how to use progressive overload, and we periodized his program. So I'm going to talk about all of that. And I'll talk about it. I'll give you examples for shoulder injuries and for shoulder pain and for lower back pain. So, hey guys, Singing Dancing Muscle Man and Amber, how you going, guys? Great to have you on the stream. Anybody on Instagram and TikTok that's watching, say hello, and you guys can ask me questions as well, and I'll answer them. So the way that we deal with people that have lower back pain, so load management is where load is the combination of intensity and volume. So intensity is how heavy you're lifting. Volume is how much you're lifting. So how many sets and how many reps per set. Martin Lasso is asking me what's my take on BPC 157 and TB 500 on peptides. My take is that they sound very promising. I've heard really, really good things about them. And if we could get them easily in Australia, I would have taken them for injuries that I have. But in Australia, we just can't get them. They're on the illegal list. But if I could get them, I would give them a try for sure. But they are the icing on the cake. And I am not somebody, I can't pull up any of the research or the studies or anything like that, so don't consider me an authority on this. But irrespective, whatever they can do for you, they are something that you would take whilst you're doing everything else that I'm already talking about. So if you can get your hands on them and you can work with somebody that can tell you what the dosages are and the way that you're meant to do it safely, then go for it. I would definitely do it if I could. So So load management is load is that combination of intensity and volume. Put those together, that's load. So that means that the volume part of load, even we need to consider the amount of volume that's going on during your day, during the everyday, or actually the correct way to say that is the load that's going on your body just during your day. Because picking up shopping, carrying groceries, any of the things that you do physically throughout the day adds load to the cup. And if you think of your cup as being, like your load tolerance, what happens is if you are somebody that's prone to injury, that's prone to pain, your load tolerance might be a little cup like this, and every bit of load that goes in that you put on your body is like water going in the cup. So when you carry the groceries up the stairs, that's putting a little bit of water in the cup. When you pick your kid up out of the car, that's putting a little bit of water in the cup. When you pick up a box and carry it or whatever, then that's putting load on the cup. Martin Lasso is saying, I plan using them while doing your plan for slap tear. Great. Go for it. Let me know how you go. And if you're working with me in the app, then make sure you're talking to me and communicating about your experience with them. So so what happens is that your cup, your metaphoric cup, your load tolerance can already be close to full when you go to the gym. So then when you go and do a workout, if you're somebody that has a low load tolerance, then just by doing 1 or 2 sets with a relatively light weight on the deadlift can be enough to trigger a spasm and cause you to go, oh my God, deadlifts are the problem. I'm in this, every time I pick up the bar, it kills me. Deadlifts aren't the right exercise for me. It's not. The problem is that your cup is too small. Your load capacity is too small, because when you do the right strength training, the size of your cup increases. So my cup is actually more like a bucket. My load capacity is like this big bucket. And so the amount of load that would cause this cup to overflow and be causing injury and pain, for me, if you poured that in my bucket, it would barely come up this high and it would be nothing to me. So there was a time that it wasn't like that for me. When I'd fractured my spine and when I was in the earlier stages of dealing with spondylolisthesis and spondylosis in L4 and L5, then a lot of things would trigger lower back pain for me. And I was in this space myself as well. And so what I did and what Milos did, Milos was exactly the same. So this is what we did for Milos. When Milos was afraid to deadlift even 40 kilograms, we taught him how to increase the size of his cup over time using something called progressive overload. And progressive overload is basically where you do the right amount for your load capacity without exceeding it, but with pushing your limits just a little bit, adding just enough stress on the body, just enough load so that the body responds via something called adaptation, and it adapts and it gets stronger. And adaptation occurs over months and years, not over days and weeks. So it is not something that happens really quickly. It is something that happens over time. But when you apply this principle effectively, then, one of my favorite sayings that I've ever heard from somebody that I heard this when I was a teenager was from Bruce Lee. And Bruce Lee said, time goes by and there's nothing you can do about that. But what you choose to do with your time is completely within your control. And the choices that you make are going to turn you into the person that you want to be or the person that you don't want to be when that time goes by. And then in Bruce Lee words, he said, so choose wisely what you do with your time, my friend. And that really stuck with me. And I heard that at the right stage of my life. It really made me think about what I do with my time, and that, that time is going to go by anyway. And, my story, the big changes that happened in my life happened when I got out of the army, and when I was I started when I was about 36. I made the decision that I was going to stop doing Kung Fu and I was going to really start doing strength and flexibility training, because I could see that I was weak and I could see that I wasn't very flexible, and I wanted to change that. And I just decided that I was really going to commit to the process. And so then when I had these injuries, when my body started breaking down because I didn't understand load management, I made this decision that I was going to go on this journey, but I didn't understand what I'm teaching you guys now. And so I made lots of mistakes with load management, and I had lots and lots of injuries. I was trying to learn calisthenics from watching YouTube videos, and it just didn't work out well for me. But because I'd already made this decision that I was going to go on this journey no matter what, I just sucked it up, and I learned from some people that could really teach these concepts, some incredible physiotherapists. And eventually I worked with some people online as well to learn much more about calisthenics so that I now have a much better understanding of it. So when you use progressive overload, and when you understand how to do this, the first thing that you have to understand is that there's going to be a lot of exercises or a lot of weights that just aren't right for you to lift. And that's okay. So when we start people that have lower back pain with deadlifting, for some people, we have to regress them back far enough that they start with hip thrusts, because hip thrusts don't put lateral pressure on the spine, meaning if this is my spine standing vertical, pressure going that way, which isn't great for the spine. And when you do deadlift, there is an element of lateral pressure on the spine, which we have to manage. We have to make sure that that's not going to push, because when you hinge at the hip and now your spine is on this angle and the weight is down here, obviously there's some pressure that is coming laterally on the spine, and we have to watch out for that. When you do a hip thrust, you mitigate that because you're now laying on your back and you're pushing upward, and there's the weight isn't pushing against your spine that way. It's a completely different way of doing the exercise, of training your glutes and training your posterior chain, and still quite effective. So that's an example of managing load with a different exercise selection. Another example of managing load for the lower back is that you do a hang deadlift, which means you're still training the deadlift pattern, but you're doing a reduced range of motion. So a hang deadlift is where when you go down on the eccentric phase, you stop when the barbell gets just below your kneecap. So it's a dramatically reduced range of motion because you're not going down like that last sort of foot of movement where the bar would come down and the weight plates would hit the ground. And so by doing that reduced range of motion with a light weight is a really good way to get exposure to the movement pattern by reducing the load. You're potentially reducing the intensity by doing lighter weight, which we did with Milos and which we do with people that have lower back pain. But you're now also reducing the load on your back by reducing the range of motion. So, and then using progressive overload would be, an example would be that you're doing your hang deadlift, and over time you increase the amount of reps that you can do until you get to the upper rep range of what we would want you to be doing in a program phase. And most likely in the earlier phases of strength training like this, we would be looking at probably the 10 to 12 rep range, maybe up to 15 reps for some people. The reason why you would do higher reps with some people is that if they have to lift such a light weight, you can add more volume by doing more reps. And then once we get up to that higher rep range, then we can increase the weight, and then we drop back to a lower rep range, and then we work up to the higher rep range but on the same weight. That's using progressive overload. And then when we get to a point where we're lifting a decent amount of weight, so let's say somebody's doing a hang deadlift with 40 kilograms now, so that's an amount of weight where we start thinking, okay, let's start looking at increasing the range of motion. So now what we can do is now we can go to a full range deadlift, or even halfway between a hang deadlift and a full range deadlift, and use a lighter weight, but then we start doing a greater range of motion. And all of this takes time. And every one of these changes that I'm talking about now, so now I've given you guys a little bit of insight into what progressive overload looks like. And there's many, many different ways to use progressive overload. And the way this is why working with a coach or an expert, somebody that really knows how to deal with the issue that you're dealing with, is so important, because there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach to this. The way that a coach or a good physiotherapist will work with you is that they're going to look at how you're responding to what they've given you, and then they make adjustments along the way. And everybody responds differently to things. For some people, they need a lot of work on technique optimization, because poor technique is also one of the ways that we mismanage load. So with a deadlift, for example, the barbell should always stay over the center of your feet, and it should move vertically up and down. There should be no more than about one inch of sort of lateral movement in the deadlift as it moves up and down. If the barbell moves 2 inches forward from your center of mass, it doubles the load on your lumbar spine. So just that much movement going forward with the bar doubles the load on the lumbar spine. So we have to look at optimizing technique very, very much before we consider increasing weight and increasing range of motion. And that is something that you really want to be working with somebody that knows what they're doing. I've almost never worked with somebody in our online coaching that comes in and that doesn't need some optimization with their technique. Even people that have been training for 10 or 15 years. And a lot of people that come in and start working with Yanni and me who have been training for 10 or 15 years, and they have these aches and pains that have been with them for a decade. It doesn't stop them training, but it stops them being able to push themselves as hard as they want just by optimizing their technique and doing structural balance training in those first 3 phases of the UMS, which, if you don't know what that is, it's the unified movement system that we teach at Unity Gym. Just by doing that, their aches and pains are gone. And we have so many testimonials on our Google reviews of people that are talking about this, where they say within like 4 to 6 weeks, their pain just goes because we correct their technique and we manage their load and we use progressive overload properly. So anyway, I'm now moving into, I've talked about load management, I've talked about progressive overload, now we talk about program periodization. Because what I just talked about there of, using progressive overload to get up to a point where we now can say, okay, the hang deadlift, you're doing pretty well with, the technique's looking good, we've increased the weight, now we're going to go to a deadlift. That's an example of using program periodization. So you would have been doing your hang deadlifts for a certain amount of time, usually 4 to 6 weeks in the UMS would be considered one program phase. And then what happens is that when you go to a new program phase, that's when we change exercise variables. So we change exercise selection. We can sometimes change tempo. We can definitely change loading parameters as well, like the amount of reps that you would do per set and the amount of sets that you would do in a workout. And the combination of changing any or all of these things is something called program periodization. And good programming manages load very effectively, so that what you're doing is, because you can't do the same thing forever and expect to get the same result. And this is a big mistake that people make when they start a program or they get a set of workouts that's good for them for where they're at right now, and that gives them that initial, wow, this is working, my body's changing from it, and my pain's diminishing. They think that if they continue doing that, or they just repeat the same program again, that they're going to continue to get the same results. And it doesn't work that way, because what happens is your body adapts to stimulation. So you're giving it a stimulus that is the right stimulus for where it is now, and the body adapts to it effectively. And then the adaptation it happens on this curve. You get this adaptation over the first few weeks, and it happens pretty quickly where the body adapts to a program, usually at around the 4 to 6 week mark. Sometimes for people it takes up to 8 weeks. Some people it can be as little as 2 or 3 weeks, rarely 2 weeks. But the sweet spot is usually around 4 weeks. And then what happens is they plateau. And then no matter how much you do that same program, no matter how much you try to continue your weights, you will hit this glass ceiling where you won't continue to adapt. And the only way to continue to achieve that adaptation and to continue to keep moving forward is to introduce a new program phase with new variables. And a good way to think about this is, like a tree will grow, or a plant or a seedling will grow towards the sun. So if there is sun coming from directly above a seedling, then the plant will grow directly up towards the sun. But if another tree comes over the top, or something causes shade, then the seedling will grow towards where the sun is. And you can see this in nature all the time. You can look at trees where you can see, like the next time you're out and you see a tree that's growing on its side like that, have a look at what's above it, or what might have been obscuring the sun from it. And so the tree will grow until it gets to the sunshine, and then it will grow up towards the sun. It won't continue to grow that way. But if it grows this way and hits the sun, and then the shade moves again, it will continue to grow and continue to move towards the sun. And if you think about that upward growth in the tree, that is like your stagnation in periodization. You're going to, in adaptation. You will stagnate and you will stop growing going forward until you introduce a new stimulus. And this is where it gets really complicated. For those of you who are watching my content, or who are watching other fitness influencers' content and trying to work this stuff out yourself, program periodization is a very complex concept. It took me a long time as a personal trainer to understand how to do it. And I didn't really understand how to do it until I went and did some workshops and some certifications with some world-class coaches to teach the concepts of periodization, and to understand why this exercise comes after that exercise, and why that exercise comes after that exercise. Because before understanding that, I had no idea why you would do a flat bench press before you do a 15-degree bench press, before you do a 30-degree bench press, and then before you would do a shoulder press, and why you would do a dumbbell shoulder press before a barbell shoulder. Like there's all these progressions with all these exercises and reasons as to why you would do them. And it is a very, very big concept that's far too big to unpack here, because, even to just unpack look, if I even talk about it with a deadlift, I'll give you an example just with a deadlift. So I've talked about why you would use a hang deadlift before you would use a conventional barbell deadlift, because the range of motion is increased. And the greatest risk to your lower back, the greatest chance of causing an injury, is going to be in that first part of the range of motion at the bottom, because that's where you're bending over the most, and that's where you're the most compromised. When you're up near the top, you're the least compromised, you're bending the least amount in the hips, which is why a hang deadlift would be a good option for you. From a conventional barbell deadlift, we go to a wide grip barbell deadlift, where your hands just go from, shoulder width apart like this, where they're basically just gripping directly underneath where they hang, and you go to a wide grip where you go a little bit wider. And what that does is, when you go a little bit wider, it means that the levers on your arm are going wider, which means you need to bend forward a little bit further to pick up the bar. So it increases the range of motion even a little bit more. And what it also does is, it now causes more demand on the muscles in the upper back to hold the weight. And then from a wide grip deadlift, we go to a snatch grip deadlift. So a snatch grip is where you're going way out to the side. You've got to bend over way more, and it puts way more pressure on your upper back. You really need to, brace with your scapula. And we actually often use a snatch grip deadlift as an upper back exercise, not as a glute and a hamstring and lower back exercise, because of the amount of strain that it puts on the upper back. It's really, really good for that. And then what we do is we go to deficit deadlifts, where you start standing on a weight plate and you start doing your conventional deadlifts or your snatch grip deadlifts. So you're going to an even greater range of motion. So that's just an example of how you can use exercise selection for program periodization. So each program phase going to something a little bit more challenging. But when you should go to the next progression is not a linear path for everybody. And I've just given you an example for one exercise. Like in a good deadlift workout, like in our deadlift workouts, we have sometimes 8 exercises in the one workout. There'll be 2 strength exercises in the primary workout and 2 flexibility exercises, because we always pair strength and flexibility so that we're being as efficient as possible. So instead of doing a set of deadlifting and then just sitting there and waiting for 3 or 4 minutes and then doing another set, you're doing a set of deadlifts, and then you're doing some shoulder mobility, and then you're doing a shoulder conditioning exercise like a rotator cuff, and then you're doing some spine mobility, and then you do your deadlift. So by the time you get back to the deadlift, you've had 4 minutes rest from the deadlift, but you've been using that time. And then we do a supplementary workout as well, where in the supplementary exercises, you're training muscle systems that are relevant to the deadlift. So you're adding volume, but you're doing things that aren't as high on the priority list. So that's where, for example, we do single leg kettlebell deadlifts, and then all the progressions from them. So, and the idea of those is that you're doing the same deadlift pattern, so the same hip bend movement pattern, but you're doing a unilateral exercise. So you're doing you're training the left leg and the right leg, so we create structural balance. And it's also where we do core training, grip training, things like that. And so each one of the exercises in the workout has its own progression path of exercises that gradually become a little bit more challenging, so that when we use program periodization, each of them are changing. So it's a beast of a thing to understand. Niv Benjamin is saying, hey, I got a question. I'm a skinny guy and I've trained by weightlifting for about 4 years just to get a basic strength level, but I'm scared to start calisthenics. So glad to be here. Is there a specific movement I need to work on before giving it a try? Listen, man, I'm going to point out the first thing I'll say is well done. Well done on you for training for 4 years and, working on your strength and wanting to progress to calisthenics. Well done. There are multiple movements that you would start your calisthenics journey on. So most people agree that for bent arm strength, you really want to get a strong dip and a strong pull-up before you start working on things like handstand push-up progressions and one-arm pull-up progressions. For straight arm strength, it's really important to develop a strong scapular push-up, which is so much harder and so much more work than the average person thinks. I get so many people coming in and submitting videos of when they want to progress to the next movement with a scapular push-up towards a planche, and they're just not ready for it. It requires so much strength, and you really need to have somebody looking at you to make sure you're doing it right. Also, a tuck lever is an important thing to develop strength on. It's like the opposing movement for a scapular push-up. And L-sits are also really good as well for calisthenics basics. But there is no do this exercise and get good at it and you'll be really, really good. Look, I shouldn't say that. If you're young, you can just, there are examples of people that are out there that, just smashed away at dips and pull-ups and push-ups and rows for 4 or 5 years until they got really strong, and then they, progressed with calisthenics. But I wonder how much quicker those same people would have gotten results if they had have understood progressive overload and program periodization more effectively, and they could have given themselves, programs that push them forward, like what I'm talking about here. And also, those people that I'm talking about, all of the people that I know examples of, they all started when they were teenagers or when they were in their 20s. And those of us that are in our 40s, our bodies do not respond the same way to exercise. So you've really got to be careful about that. Amber is saying, I'm learning the deadlifts right now. Do you keep your shoulders back and down throughout the entire lift, even in the bent over pickup part? You don't actually keep your shoulders back in the deadlift. So you don't retract your scapula, you depress. So the idea of the depressing the scapula, it's to engage the lats. So you do not want to be, shrugging your shoulders or bending your elbows when you deadlift. You want to be really relying on the glute strength and the lat strength, so when you depress, you really pull the lats into the movement, and that helps to brace the body. And then you just push the ground away from you, basically. So you're gripping really tight. You white knuckle the bar, so that your white knuckling means that you grip so tight that the blood comes out of your hands and your knuckles start to go white. That drives, that increases neural drive and actually increases rotator cuff activation. So the tighter you grip with your hand on any exercise, the more your rotator cuff is going to work, which is what you want in virtually every exercise that involves gripping. Then with your feet under your hips, so you do not go to squat width with the deadlift, you keep your feet under your hips. It would be way too narrow for a squat. You're pushing the knees outward so that you're engaging the glutes more. By pushing the knees outward, you're engaging the gluteus medius. And then you just think of shoulders down, knees out, push the ground away from you. And by pushing the ground away from you, your knees will, so if these are your knees will straighten, and then your hips will hinge at the end. And that is, in a nutshell, how you do your deadlifts, Amber. Singing Dancing Muscle Man is saying, do you have any thoughts on using paused variations of the basic barbell lifts as a form of progressive overload? For example, pausing a squat at the most difficult point in the range of motion for 2 to 5 seconds. Absolutely. Pause reps are an incredible way to force progressive overload, to force adaptation and to achieve progressive overload. So when you do pause reps on any exercise, any barbell exercise, and then you go back to no pause, you will be stronger. And I do use pause reps periodically. I actually did, you can see my videos from late last year, I was doing pause reps on pull-ups and dips. So pause reps for dips is where you pause at the bottom range of motion. Pause reps for pull-ups is where you pause at the top range of motion. And they are a really, really good way to achieve adaptation and force progressive overload. So that's pretty much it. I did end up only talking about the back, so maybe I'll do this again and tomorrow, and I'll talk about the shoulder, because I said I was going to talk about the shoulder. So if you tune in tomorrow, I'll make sure I do the same talk, but I'll talk specifically to shoulder pain, things like slap tears and torn rotator cuffs and stuff like that. But I really hope that you guys have some food for thought now, some concepts of how you can use this stuff in your own training to be able to get better. And for those of you that really want to overcome pain and that want to achieve, you're welcome, Niv, by the way. Thanks for watching, and thanks for your comments. For those of you that want to achieve great results and reduce those aches and pains, I strongly recommend that you consider coming and joining our UMS online coaching, where you'll work directly with me and you'll have all your programs written for you, and you will never have to think about this again. You just turn up and do the work. One of our members, I interviewed him the other day, and he came to us for shoulder pain, and he had really bad shoulder pain in the mornings every day when he was waking up. He'd been to physiotherapists and doctors, and nothing they did fixed it. And within 6 weeks of working with me in the UMS online coaching, he has fixed his shoulder pain. He has no more shoulder pain anymore. And I asked him what he would say to somebody else that was considering joining, and he said, do it. He says it costs 1 month of working with UMS online coaching costs less than one physical therapy session. And, you know, when I spoke to another one of our members the other day as well, you know, they were pointing out that even if you do it for a whole year costs you a few $100s, which is a fraction of what you would pay for just several physiotherapy sessions. And that's where you just go and get one session, and then you have to walk away and do it all on your own and hope that you're doing it the right way. And you'd only get a few sessions of that for what you would end up spending on a full year of working with me. And in a year of working with Yanni and me online, you're going to overcome almost every injury that you have in your body, and you'll understand more about training, more about strength training, about load management, about flexibility training, about progressive overload, about periodization than you ever will from watching YouTube videos and watching content and asking questions on this. When you actually do it and you get it done for you, and you can, you can look back on your programs and see how it's evolved, you'll really know what's going on. So check, if that's you and you want to do that and you just want to go all in and give it a try, go to unitygym.com. If you've got a shoulder injury, go to unitygym.com/slap tear. And guys, thank you so much for watching. If you've made it this far, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I cannot tell you how much it helps. Just take a second, hit that subscribe button. It goes such a long way. And I'll see you guys tomorrow. Amber's saying go all in, everyone. She's one of our UMS online coaching tribe members, so she knows how good it is. Go and have a look at Genevieve Nell's testimonial video that I just put up the other day. It only went up about 5 days ago, where she says at the start of the video, she says how she was researching us online and she was watching all of our videos, and she thought like we were like the magic, fix. Like she was watching our stuff saying, oh, these guys are too good to be true. This is ridiculous. They must be hamming it up. And she said that once she got in, she said we exceeded her expectations and we were better than what she thought she would be, because she didn't think she'd be getting the personalized coaching that she gets from me. Anyway. All right, team, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you tomorrow, where I'm going to talk about this same stuff, but to do with shoulder pain and shoulder injuries and slap tears.